Good morning. So this is a video I've kind of wanted to do for a while. It's a little bit different than a lot of the things that I usually do. I kind of want to tell a little bit about my own personal story, and I want to talk about leaving a relationship that no longer serves you, or leaving a relationship that isn't in sync with who you are. Um, and overcoming the fear and the life changes that come with that. So about 10 years ago, I made a complete shift in my life. I I was married for 17 years at the time. I finally got a divorce after 20 years of marriage, but we were together for 17 years, living together. And the marriage, I think from the beginning, from the first year, I knew that it wasn't in sync with me. It wasn't a good match. And because of my conditioning, because of the way that I was raised, you don't get a divorce, you stay. We already had children within the first year. My son was born, and then my daughter was born within the first 2 years. And then I went out to study, and it kind of like wasn't on the table. An option of separating wasn't really on the table. It was more like I had given up on leaving from the very beginning. And also, not only the conditioning, but also my own fears. I got married when I was really young. And see, this is my individual story, but I know that there are a lot of parallels between, you get used to being with somebody you don't know how you would manage on your own, that the fear of leaving the known into the unknown. Also afraid of being on your own, afraid of, okay, what am I going to do on my own? At some point I already had 4 children, and, how am I going to manage? What am I going to do? You get stuck in this place of, first of all, you're used to it. You already know how to deal with this. You already are in this. You're already put a lot of your time and effort into this relationship, and you have built a life together. You've built a home together. You've built a life together, and the thought of leaving can be so scary. Also, the thought of, I'm going to stay alone. I'm going to be alone, or how am I going to make a living on my own, or even the fear of the separation itself. It's going to be difficult to divorce this person because they are going to make my life miserable, or how am I going to take care of the kids on my own, or where am I going to live? We get into these cycles with our spouses, especially when we're married for so long and we're in the relationship for so long, that we already know how to maneuver within that. And we're afraid of leaving that. Sometimes it's not bad, with my marriage. My marriage was not a good marriage. There was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse in there. There very little physical abuse, but mostly very dominating, very closing, very I was closed off to even girlfriends. For years and years and years, I was pretty much isolated, also from family, and in by there's a cycle in there. It's a lot more complex than that, but in the gist of things, if you were to label it, you would be able to label it in that way. In other ways, there were things that I excelled at. I went out and I studied, and we built a business together, and that was very successful. And we had 4 children and a home, and a life living in the suburbs. It's a life that some people might, that from the outside, I don't know if you could really see what was going on the inside. But for years and years and years, I always had this yearning of something else, of not being under somebody's thumb. I wanted to leave. I wanted to, even in some relationships, it's not a bad relationship. You're with a good partner, but there's just something in the relationship that's not fulfilling, and you feel like there's more to life than this. And when I finally did leave, after 17 years, I finally did leave. It was difficult. I did go through, I did go through a lot of, by the time I did leave, it was so far. I was so miserable that there was no other choice. It's like coming to your rock bottom. I was an alcoholic. I was twice the weight I am now. I was unhappy. I was lonely, the most lonely that I had ever been in my life when I was in a relationship. The relationship didn't fulfill anything with me, and it was it was in an abusive way. Constantly being put down and constantly being held, held almost like captive. And in some ways, there are no absolutes. And I didn't feel like I had the power in the relationship. I didn't feel like I had the power to up and leave. And I know, and that was the victim mode, not finding my own power. So in order for me to leave, I really had to, first of all, I had to get to a point that it was so bad that there was no continuation. I couldn't continue on that path. Even if I knew that I was going to go and become homeless on some beach, it was going to be better than that. So at some point it got to a place where I couldn't continue anymore. And it didn't, there was so much fear in leaving, but the fear of staying became greater than the fear of leaving. And so at some point I left, and it was difficult. And it was, it took me, even though the marriage wasn't good, and even though I was the one that decided to leave, I didn't realize how much I was dependent. When you leave after 20 years, you don't even know who you are anymore, because you become like this cycle with somebody else. You become like one entity with somebody else. I didn't even know how everything, it was like baby steps. It was like being reborn. I had to figure out how I want to keep house. I had to figure out, well, am I doing this because he told me this is what he taught me to do? Or is it because this is the way that I see that things should be done? You have to like relearn everything. And also there's nobody else there. There's nobody else there. You want to go to the store for a second and you have little kids. There's nobody there to be with the kids. It's like all of a sudden you are it. You are the provider. You are the one that has to make dinner every evening. You're the one that has to clean everything that gets done. It is you on your own. You are the maker of yourself. So on the one hand, it's like all of a sudden you're alone and you're thrown into this, how am I going to do all this? And on the other hand, it's like totally empowering, because, I get to make it, and I get to do it, and I get to be the one that decides in everything. And I think that also with these big life changes, it also brings you into a place where you start questioning, well, once you break something that is in your life that is so detrimental, like a relationship, going through a divorce, breaking up a marriage, and you see that you can do it. One of the hardest things for me to cope with after I did it, after I left, was the sorrow of all the years that I had stayed. I think that was a big one. That took me a couple of years at least to get over. Like, I could have just walked away, because once I did walk away and once I did get out of it, okay, so it was difficult, and just know that things always have to work out. There is no separation in the world. There is no gap. So when you start moving out of something, other things start moving in. You start moving towards other things. And so as difficult as it was, things do, in the end, somehow always manage to work out. Things always work out once you start telling life where you want to be and how you want to do it, and you start moving towards that. Life is like, okay, so she's moving in this direction. Let's come in around her and support her in her new endeavor. And so that was something that I realized. But also that one of the hardest things was the sorrow of, it's almost like you're mourning the years that you didn't get up and leave. And a lot of the things that what allowed me peace in that. Besides my children, I have all of my children, and that was something that was absolutely, and the experiences that I got to go through. It's like your big dragons. When you slay your biggest dragons, then you become a mighty. You become so strong. And so for me to leave him, it was so life-changing. It was like my biggest dragon. It had all of my little dragons in it. How am I going to do it on my own? Am I worthy? Am I going to stay alone? All of the things. And he was telling me also, nobody is going to want you. Who's going to want to go out with you? He was telling me those things alongside my own insecurities of those things. But that was part of it. And so one of the biggest things was the sorrow, like, oh no, I could have just upped and left years ago. And then what really gave me relief from that was the knowing that if I had been able to up and leave years before, I would have. I had to go through everything that I went through in order for it to be, in order for my life to feel so meaningless, in order for me to get to the point where I was willing to fight for myself, where I was willing to say, okay, enough. This is it. And when you get to that point, it's like hitting rock bottom, and then you hit the spring, and it springs you. And it took me years, for the first 2.5 years, I didn't want to hear about men. I was so turned off of men. I didn't want to, not that I'm, turned on to women. I was just completely taking care of myself, going through getting off of alcohol. I moved my family back to Israel and rented a house near my parents. So that I could have emotional support. I started losing weight. I started on this spiritual awakening. It basically, when you start making such a massive change in your life, everything starts shifting, because you start realizing, when you start shedding these falsities and the things that held me in place, my insecurities, my self-doubts, my feeling worthy, feeling like that's what I'm worthy of. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed. There was something that I heard that really changed the way that I looked at things and really changed my life. And it said that you will stay with somebody that you feel worthy of. So if somebody treats you in a certain way and you feel worthy of that treatment, you'll stay. But the second that they treat you a little bit less than what you feel like you're worthy of, you won't stay anymore. And that made me realize that I had stayed for so many years because something in me had thought that was what I had deserved, or that was what I was worthy of. And when I realized that, then I started taking the power back in my own life, realizing, wait a minute, then I have the power. I'm the one that gets to say what I'm worth and what I'm not worth, and how people can treat me. I allowed that to go on. I allowed him to treat me that way, or even to be in that situation. I was an allowance of it. Otherwise, it would have never happened. And not all relationships are as as definite or as as extreme as my relationship. Sometimes we're stuck in relationships that there isn't anything really wrong with them, but we don't feel fulfilled, or and that relationship is holding the space for a relationship or a life that we would feel completely in love with. We're settling for a him-ha life when there is a life that is exciting right around the corner, that has everything that we could ever want in it. We get to make the life that we want. And so I just want to sum this up. So that believing in that you can make the change, and you're the only one that can make the change, and that you get to make the decisions in your life, and that you don't have to stay because of fear, or because of fear of lack, or afraid of the unknown, or, things will always work out. Things are always working out for you. If you've noticed, you can look back in your life and see that things have always worked out. So things, even the hardest things that we have gone through, we've overcome. Somehow, they have worked out for us. So if we want to make a change, and we want we are allowed, first of all, to decide for ourselves. And we are the only ones that can make that change for us. Sometimes there's changes that are decided for us. Yeah. Sometimes, you're on the other side of the spectrum where your spouse is leaving you. But still, you are the one that is in charge of your life and how you determine it, and you could see that in a way that you don't want to be with somebody that is not feeling fulfilled when they are with you as well. You don't want to be in a relationship that, if one part of the relationship is leaving, then the relationship isn't divine. Then the relationship isn't that perfect relationship. So you don't want to be in it as well. So you can also look at it in that way. And so there is a life after divorce, and there's spectacular life. I am in such a different place than I was 10 years ago. And you can never know how things are going to open up and work out for you. And there is pain and change. There is pain, whether you're the one that's leaving or you're the one that has been left. There is always pain and change, but that is your growth. You grow through it, and you can go out and create the life that you really want. There is also a freedom and a power in knowing that you can decide, and knowing that there is always a difference, and that if you have the yearning for a better life, then that better life is in existence. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a yearning for it. It's just like there can't be black without white. There can't be a yearning for something if it doesn't exist, because there would be no concept of it and there would be no perception of it. So just in the yearning for it, you know that the option has to exist. The question is how you become a match for it and allow it to flow into your life. So I'm going to go ahead and end this here. This is more of like a personal sharing experience, and kind of showing that that you do have the power to make changes in your life, even big changes. So I appreciate you watching. Thank you.